Hey everybody, welcome to History University. My name is Tom and I will be your educator for this video. Today we are going to break down the important people, places, events, inventions, and moments of the 2nd century. This video is the second installment of my Century series, and like my first video, I want to point out that many topics brought up in this video are worthy of their own video. I'm squeezing in 100 years of history in a YouTube video. So the majority of events explained are brief overviews of what happened, which makes for a good introduction into a topic, but not enough to fully comprehend the complexities of each event. I am making these videos in hope that you guys will learn a little bit more about the people, places, and events that were notable during each century. After reading up on this period a bit, the only way I can truly describe it is by calling it the Roman century. If I didn't know any better, I would name this video the Roman century. But as many of my Roman-loving viewers will note, a Roman century is a position in the Roman army and not a length of time. All technicalities aside, the 2nd century was one of the most successful time periods of Rome. Historians call the time period between 27 BC and 180 AD as Pax Romana, which means Roman peace, and is essentially another way of saying Rome's golden age. Between 96 AD and 180 AD, historians refer to the emperors of Rome as the 5 good emperors. During this time period, Rome will see their golden age pioneered by the men who led their empire. The 5 good emperors are Nerva, Trajan, Hadrian, Antonius Pius, and Marcus Aurelius. For the purpose of this video, we'll be starting off with Trajan, who is the Roman emperor of the time. If you have not yet seen the 1st century video that I have made and want to watch these videos in chronological order, now would be the time to do so. Last thing to note before we start, some of the records from this time period give us a general idea of when things happened, but are not the exact date, so a few of these years might be slightly off, but nonetheless they occurred during the 2nd century. So without further ado, let's talk about Rome and the world during the 2nd century. In 100 AD, the Roman army reaches 300,000 soldiers, lions become extinct in the Balkans, and around this year, paper is used by the general populace in China. In 101, Roman Emperor Trajan starts an expedition against Dacia. After this expedition, Rome will have larger boundaries than ever set by Augustus Caesar. Plutarch writes his Parallel Lives of Famous Men, containing 50 biographies, of which 46 are presented as pairs, comparing Greek and Roman celebrities. For example, Theseus and Romulus, Alexander the Great and Julius Caesar, and Demosthenes and Cicero. In 105, papermaking is refined by Chinese eunuch Kai Lun. He receives official praise from the emperor for his methods of making paper from tree bark, hemp, remnant rags, and fish nets. Paper has been made in China for the previous 300 years, but Kai Lun's paper provides for a writing surface far superior than anything before. In 106, Ignatius writes letters to Christians in Smyrna, where he uses the term Catholic Church. This is the oldest surviving term of the word Catholic Church. In 108, Tacitus writes Histories, which covers the period between 69 AD and 96 AD. In 110, the Roman Empire manages to have more than 75,000 kilometers of roads. In 112, a man named Hadrian becomes the Archon of Athens, which is a high-ranking magistrate position in ancient Greece. In 113, Emperor Trajan sails from Rome to begin his expedition against Parthia. He arrives in Athens, where Parthian envoys greet him with olive branches, which is a sign of peace. Later that year, Trajan declares Armenia to be annexed as a Roman province. In 116, Emperor Trajan completes his invasion of Parthia by capturing the cities Babylon, Ctesiphon, Seleucia, and Susa. This is the high mark of Roman Empire's eastern expansion. In 117, Trajan subdues a revolt during the Kitos War, but then falls ill. He returns home and leaves Hadrian in command. Then, on his deathbed, he designates Hadrian to be his successor. Hadrian, a Spaniard like Trajan, becomes emperor. He then inaugurates a policy of retrenchment and cultural integration, giving up the policy of conquest by his predecessors in order to consolidate the empire. Hadrian returns large parts of Mesopotamia to the Parthians as part of a peace settlement. The empire then decides to focus on issues inside the borders, rather than continue to expand. In 118, the city of Rome reaches a population of over 1 million, which is the largest city in the world at the time. In 119, Emperor Hadrian visits Britain under the request of Quintus Pompeius Falco, who is serving as Roman governor of Britain at the time. In 120, the famous Roman historian Suetonius becomes Hadrian's secretary. In 122, while in Britain, Emperor Hadrian orders a 73-mile wall to be built to mark the northern Roman Empire. The wall is now known as Hadrian's Wall, and it is intended to keep the Picts and other tribes at bay. In 123, we see Ban Yang re-establish Chinese control over the Tarim Basin. We also see Chinese scientist Zhang Heng correct the calendar to bring it into line with the 4 seasons. In 125, the construction of the Pantheon begins. It is an interesting story about how the Pantheon was built. It was built, then demolished, then rebuilt, and then some leftover inscriptions from the old one were put on the new one, so the exact dates of construction are hard to find because they overlap. Also in 125, we see Hadrian distribute imperial lands to small farmers. And we also see our boy Zhang Heng again of the Han Dynasty in China. This time, he invents a hydraulic-powered artillery sphere. In 127, after 7 years of going around the Roman Empire, Hadrian returns back to Rome. In 128, Hadrian leaves Rome to visit the Roman province of North Africa. At this point, Hadrian's wall is complete. Along the wall, there are constructed 16 forts with about 15,000 legionaries digging ditches, quarrying rocks, and cutting stones, in effort to keep the native Briton tribes out. 128, we also see Roman agriculture decline as imports from Egypt and North Africa depress wheat prices, making it unprofitable to farm and forcing many farmers off their land. The decline in Roman agriculture leads to more dependency on wheat, which is produced in North Africa. As a result, Roman bakeries now produce dozens of types of bread, and it becomes Roman policy to distribute free bread to the poor. 128, Hadrian departs from North Africa to inspect Greece and Egypt. In 129, Hadrian continues his voyages, now inspecting Caria, Cappadocia, and Syria. In 130, a law is passed in Rome banning the execution of slaves without a trial, which is a nice win for human rights there. In 131, the Edict of Hadrian prohibits the act of circumcision. Additionally, Hadrian prohibits public reading of the Torah under penalty of death, as well as observances of the Sabbath, festivals, and teaching of Judaic law. In 133, we once again see our Chinese scientists inventing genius items. Zhang Heng invents the first ever seismometer. This device determines the exact cardinal direction of earthquakes from hundreds of miles away. The device employs a series of complex gears around a central swinging pendulum. In 133, we see the Bar Kokhba revolt. The Roman governor of Britain is sent to Judea to quell the revolt. Jewish rebels, led by Simon Bar Kokhba, cut off the main supply lines for Roman garrisons in Palestine. Despite Roman reinforcements from Syria and Egypt, Simon Bar Kokhba establishes an independent state in Judea. In 134, the Romans retake Jerusalem. In 135, a Jewish diaspora begins. Emperor Hadrian bars Jews from Jerusalem, and the survivors of his massacre are dispersed across the Roman Empire. Many of them flee to Mediterranean ports. In 138, Hadrian makes Antonius Pius his successor, on condition that he adopt Marcus Aurelius and Lucius Verus. Adoption worked a little differently back then. Often leadership was passed down through generations, so it would become common for leaders to adopt their successor, even if it was a grown man. It was more of a way to pass down power than actually raising another person. A few months later, Hadrian passes, and Antonius Pius ascends to emperor in 138. In 142, Antonius Pius orders the construction of Antonian Wall. This wall stretches 40 miles in Britain and has 19 forts around it. In 145, Marcus Aurelius marries Faustina the Younger, a daughter of Antonius Pius. In 150, the Great Pyramid of the Sun is constructed in Teotihuacan. It is the tallest pre-Columbian building in the Americas. In 150, we also see the earliest atlas in Ptolemy's Geography. 150 is also the approximate date for the completion of Ptolemy's monumental work, Almagest. In his work, he declares the geocentric model, which holds sway for 1400 years. In 160 in Rome, we see the manufacturing of soap. It contains grease, lime, and ashes at this time. We also see the first Buddhist monks arrive in China. In 161, Emperor Antonius Pius passes away. Marcus Aurelius and Lucius Verus split power as emperor. In 162, Lucius Verus begins a war with the Parthians. In 165, a pandemic known as the Antonian Plague breaks out in Rome. After the Roman army returns to Parthia, the plague significantly depopulates the Roman Empire and China. In 169, northern African Moors invade what is now Spain. Lucius Verus passes away, which allows for Marcus Aurelius to take complete control over the role of emperor. The Suebian tribe of Marcomanni crosses the Danube and invades Italy. In 171, Armenia and Mesopotamia become protectorates of the Roman Empire. In 172, Emperor Marcus Aurelius crosses the Danube with expeditionary forces. He subdues the Marcomanni and their allies, and then, in a pact sign of Germanic tribes, he imports them to the Roman Empire to occupy areas that have just been depopulated by the plague. In 174, Empress Faustina the Younger accompanies her husband Marcus Aurelius on various military campaigns. She is given the title of Mater Castorum, which is Mother of the Camp. In 174, we also see Marcus Aurelius write meditations in Greek while on his military campaigns. In 176, Marcus Aurelius grants his son Commodus the rank of Imperator, which makes him the supreme commander of the Roman legions. In 177, Commodus is given the title of Augustus and made co-emperor with his father. In 180, Marcus Aurelius dies, which puts an end to the 5 good emperor period, and his son Commodus now becomes emperor. We now enter the period known as the Late Empire in Rome. In 181, the Antonian Wall is overrun in Britannia. There's also a volcano in New Zealand that erupts. It is one of the largest on Earth in the last 5,000 years. The effects of the eruption are seen as far as Rome and China. In 182, there is a failed assassination attempt on Commodus. He then decides to put many distinguished Roman figures to death of charges of being in on a conspiracy to assassinate him. In 185, Emperor Commodus drains Rome's treasury to put on gladiatorial spectacles. He confiscates property to support his own pleasures, and he participates as a gladiator and boasts of victories of over 1,000 matches in the Circus Maximus. Ji Yao, a Kushan Buddhist monk, translated Buddhist texts into the Chinese language during the Han Dynasty. In 189, a plague, possibly smallpox, kills 2,000 people per day in Rome. Farmers are unable to harvest their crops, and food shortages bring riots to the city. On December 31st, 192, Emperor Commodus alarms the Senate by appearing dressed as a gladiator for his new consulship, which starts on January 1st. Marcia hires a champion wrestler named Narcissus to assassinate Commodus. Commodus is killed, and the Antonian dynasty ends. 193. This year is awfully special, and I am delighted to be able to share it with you. It has an entirely unique storyline, and honestly deserves a YouTube video of its own. January 1st will mark a new year, which historians call the Year of the 5 Emperors. January 1st, the Roman Senate chooses Publius Elvius Pertinax against his will to succeed Commodus as emperor. Pertinax is forced to reorganize the handling of finances, which were wrecked under Commodus, to reestablish discipline in the Roman army, and to suspend the food programs established by Trajan, which happened to provoke members of his personal bodyguard. On March 28th, Pertinax is assassinated by his own bodyguards, who stormed the imperial palace. The empire is auctioned off. Marcus Didius Julianus, the highest bidder, offered 300 million sesterces for the role. Then we see 2 different Roman governors claim the throne for themselves. We have Claudius Albinus from Britannia, and we have Pescennius Niger from Syria. Both of them get support from their troops to go take the throne. April 14th, Lucius Septimus Severus is proclaimed emperor by his troops in the Balkans. He marches with his army to Rome. On June 1st, Septimus Severus enters the capital and puts Julianus to death. He replaces the empire's bodyguards with a 15,000-man force from his Danubian legions. Later in June, Septimus Severus defeats Pescennius at the Battle of Nicaea. In Britain, Claudius Albinus allies with Septimus Severus and accepts the title of Caesar. In 195, Roman Emperor Septimus Severus has the Roman Senate deify Commodus in attempt to gain favor from the family of Marcus Aurelius. In 195, Claudius Albinus, who has been proclaimed emperor in Britain, crosses into Gaul with his legions, while at the same time recruiting new soldiers. He is soon to have an army of 150,000 men. Severus, who is in Mesopotamia at this time, returns to Rome. In 196, Septimus Severus attempts to assassinate Claudius Albinus, but fails, causing Albinus to retaliate militarily. Emperor Severus then captures and sacks Byzantium. The city is rebuilt to its previous prosperity. In 197, Septimus Severus defeats Claudius Albinus at the Battle of Lugdunum, also known as the Battle of Leon. Albinus commits suicide, and then Severus returns to Rome, and after he declares his victory, he claims he is the adopted son of Marcus Aurelius. And then, in 199, Mesopotamia is partitioned into 2 Roman provinces. This century sees the end of Pax Romana and the 5 good emperors, and it is followed up with the Year of 5 Emperors. That wraps up my overview of the 2nd century. This has been my most requested series, so going forward I will prioritize continuing this series. Before you guys go, I want to thank all of you for 500 subscribers. Your support means a lot to me and it keeps me going. I'm trying to hit that goal of 1,000, so if you have not subscribed, please do. Thank you everyone for tuning in. I hope you have a good day and look forward to my 3rd century video.